Thank you for watching this week's Weatherquest farming forecast. We're going to start this week's farming forecast by taking a look at some of the world weather headlines as they pertain to agriculture around the world, starting in the United States, where we've seen some cold air moving out of Canada across the Great Plains and western parts of the United States. And some areas have been as much as 10 degrees Fahrenheit below average over the last week. But further east, we have had some rainfall, and that's eased some of the drought concerns in eastern parts of the United States and also benefited the pastures there with the grass growing and some of the newly sown crops too. So generally good news for eastern areas of the US. For Australia, we have had some wet weather there as well, particularly southeastern Australia that's been dealing with a long-term drought. We have had a little bit of flooding there. That's delayed some of the field work, but in general, I think the rain benefiting the longer-term situation across parts of Australia. The big news across Western Russia has been the very cold start to autumn. That cold start has hastened winter wheat into dormancy already across central and northern parts of Western Russia, and also into Scandinavia as well with that cold start to autumn. Further west, though, across central and western parts of Russia, or Europe, I should say, the rain there has maintained abundant moisture supply for the winter crop. So pretty good news, I think, for the western half of Europe. Now, we've been showing this graph on and off for the last few months. This is a 3-year rainfall anomaly for East Anglia, showing that in general over the 3-year period, particularly peaking in the spring of this year in 2019, rainfall deficits of as much as 180 millimeters over a 3-year period. But what we've seen is a wet period of weather in June, and then followed by a couple of wetter months here at the start of autumn, and we are seeing rainfall deficits coming back up closer to normal. So our 1-year deficit now at only 38 millimeters across East Anglia, still down almost 150 millimeters though for the 3-year period. So the longer term trend still below average, but you wouldn't know that with all the wet weather that we've seen recently, and that is reflected in the soil moisture. So these soil moisture charts here, the blue dots on the map here showing excessive soil moisture on the 26th of October, highlighting all the wet weather that we've seen in the last couple of weeks across the UK. But you can see that if I move this forward just 5 days to the 31st of October, we've had a little bit of a drier spell of weather during that time period, and it has eased some of that soil moisture across central and eastern areas. So it doesn't take a lot, maybe just a 5-day, a week period of slightly drier than average conditions to help the soil dry out even at this time of year. So we can just find that in the forecast, and that would be useful for a lot of you guys out there that are still doing your drilling for your winter wheat and also trying to finish the harvest of the potatoes as well. That's the phone calls we've been getting on our premium rate line most regularly, is about how we'll see if we're going to see any drier weather during the next couple of weeks to help finish off those two tasks. So we're going to start by looking at the jet stream over the next few days, and it's not great news from that perspective. The jet stream is still quite active across the North Atlantic, with areas of more active jet stream at times moving across the British Isles over the next few days, and this is just going to continue to bring low pressure systems off of the Atlantic across the British Isles and keep us in a more general unsettled period of weather. So this is what it looks like on Thursday, with a deep area of low pressure moving southeastwards across the UK. And across the northern side of that low pressure, we're going to see some excessive rainfall. I think could even produce some localized flooding across parts of eastern England and into the northern part of the Midlands before that low pressure drifts further south and east into the continent. But by Friday, you can see a weak ridge of higher pressure building. That'll allow things to dry out, giving us a little bit of a reprieve from the rain on Thursday, and just allowing us to get out and get a few things done. But over my shoulder, this next area of low pressure is set to move across the British Isles from the north and west as we go into the weekend. So this is Saturday. You can see another front crossing the UK with low pressure. Eventually, though, that will slowly move its way into the continent, not before we see maybe even a little bit of wintry weather over the higher ground of northern England and into Scotland, but leaving us in drier conditions for Sunday as well. So a real back and forth picture for the next 4 days, I think. Thursday being wet, Friday being dry, Saturday being wet, Sunday being dry. So kind of going back and forth, but in general, it's an unsettled theme. And that's highlighted in the ensemble forecast for pressure as well. So If you want to find out more about ensemble forecasting, we'll put a link on the screen here. Dan did a nice explainer showing how ensemble forecasts are created, but what they're showing here is the range of uncertainty or possibility over the next 10 days for sea level pressure at Manchester. And you can see that drop in pressure on Thursday that we highlighted, then the increase in pressure, and then the next low coming in on Saturday, and then some higher pressure on Sunday. But the pattern after that, very unsettled still, and there's still some quite low pressure pattern potential in there as we go through the next week and a half or two. So I think the general theme of the weather will continue to be unsettled, and that shows up in the potential water gain here. So what we're doing here is looking at precipitation minus evaporation to see if the ground will be wetter in 10 days time than it is at the moment. And in general, you can see that big area of rain for Thursday and then another bump in rainfall around Saturday, but the general trend continues to take that deficit upwards. And in fact, the average from the ensemble members suggesting that will be about 35 to 40 millimeters wetter in Manchester in 10 days time on the ground than we currently are. So no real help for drying soils out across central parts of Britain especially. So for the next few days, if you are going to try to grab some opportunity for spraying, I think I've already highlighted that Friday and Sunday are your best chances. You can see this is Thursday, not much opportunity. Then the low clears. We see the greens become more widespread. That's Saturday there with not much potential, and the graph will, or the chart rather, will end on Sunday showing the more widespread green there. So if you do have spraying to get done and you can get out on the fields given how wet they'll be, Friday and Sunday probably your best opportunity in the next couple of days. If you want more detail about that though, we are available on the phones between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. 7 days a week. You can ring us up, speak directly to a trained weather forecaster and ask questions. As I mentioned, we're talking a lot to farmers recently about trying to get the potato harvests finished and also drilling winter wheat, and some concerns just creeping in there about sugar beet as well, given the fact that the fields are quite wet at the moment and being worried about any potential wet weather or cold weather, I should say, that we could see coming towards the end of autumn and the early part of winter. So looking at our monthly forecast products, we'll start by the mean pressure anomaly for week 2. So this is the 11th of November to the 17th, where we see lower than normal pressure across Western Europe. What that's going to mean is that we're going to see this feed of easterly winds for the most part coming in across the North Sea and continuing to drive in rain there, and you can see that's reflected by the rainfall anomaly during that week there. So wetter than average conditions across much of central and eastern Britain, and particularly down across the Mediterranean, with this low pressure just spinning away down in here, allowing moisture and rain and thunderstorms to come up from the Mediterranean across much of Italy, southern France, and a lot of Iberia as well. But a wet start, I think, or a wet middle part of the month, I should say, across eastern parts of Britain too. With that low pressure still drawing in some air from the north and east at times, and it is going to keep Western Europe generally colder than average, but you can see the anomaly across the Black Sea coast and up into Western Russia, southwestern Russia, I should say, much above average in terms of temperature during that week. A big shift really into week 2, and then this is, or week 3 rather, and then this is the pattern I think we're expected to see hold on to the end of the month really, where we have higher than average pressure across parts of Western Russia and Scandinavia. We see lower than average pressure over Iceland and some slightly higher than normal pressure to the southwest of the UK as well. So weather systems will be trying to work their way in from the Atlantic into western fringes of the British Isles, but this area of high pressure here likely to block most of those coming in and to keep us in a little bit more of a settled spell of weather. And in fact, the average from these ensemble models suggesting that many parts of the UK will either be near average for rainfall or even slightly drier than average. So that's probably good news for most of us who are looking for some opportunities to get back out on the field. And you can see that sort of signal for drier than average conditions across much of central and northern parts of Europe under that high pressure, but still some rain and showers to come for coastal parts of the Mediterranean. Temperature-wise, looking like not much of a signal for wetter, or so I should say warmer or colder than average across Western Europe. Still looking at slightly warmer than normal conditions in the southeast though. And then as we go into week 4, as mentioned, we still have this pattern with high pressure across western parts of Russia, drifting slightly further to the east by this stage, and we can see that lower than average pressure starting to extend into western parts of the British Isles. And in general, what I think that will mean is that the rainfall anomalies here are near average for western areas. I wouldn't be surprised to see this end up being a little bit wetter than average though across parts of Ireland and western parts of Britain, and then probably near average across eastern parts of Britain. So still a little bit unsettled, like with that low pressure starting to extend from the northeast, and you can see the anomaly for drier than average conditions really starting to edge back into to western Russia and even more central parts of Russia by the very last week of November. Also, with that high pressure moving further to the east, the air flowing around high pressure in a clockwise fashion will mean that we have lots of southerly air coming up across eastern parts of Europe and into Scandinavia, so places that have been much colder than average over the last couple of weeks, expecting to end November on a slightly warmer than average note, but still really no significant sign of warmer or colder than normal conditions to end the month across the British Isles. I think the good news there is that there's no sign of any real cold snap of weather, at least to come through the rest of the month of November. So for us, the UK overview, frequent areas of low pressure at first. It will continue that unsettled theme to the weather, and as we showed in that ensemble chart for rainfall, it does look like it's going to be wetter on the ground for most of us, particularly central Britain, in 10 days' time than it is now. There will be some occasional ridges of high pressure in between these lows, though, that will allow you to get out and get some work done, but also could bring the risk of a few frosty nights. Below average temperatures at first, but generally no real signal to temperatures as we go toward the middle of the month, and that pertains to the last bullet point here. There's no real strong signal for abnormal conditions through the middle and end of November. So once we get past this unsettled weather over the next week or so, we should see things becoming much near average as we go toward the middle and end of the month. No real strong signals one way or the other there. Thank you very much for watching, and if you want to interact with us, you can get in touch with us on social media, hashtag WQ Farming Forecast. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook, and you can also email us at info@weatherquest.co.uk. Thanks for watching.